What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Earlier this week, Nintendo released their financial report, and with that came Q&A with investors. And while they certainly grilled Nintendo about many different things, which includes their approach to next generation, as well as rising R&D costs, and there were some pretty interesting bits of insight from Nintendo. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be taking a look at the PlayStation 5 Pro's release today, with reviews going live yesterday, and it's going about how we expect, and SEGA has been continuing to push along some of their old IPs with these different revivals, and it looks like there's one more that they've announced. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below, and of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Take-Two, Rockstar, and Grand Theft Auto 6, which is probably one of the most anticipated games we've ever had. And, well, apparently it's coming out next year. I say apparently because many people believe that Rockstar and Take-Two will end up delaying this game maybe into 2026. Well, they did have some of their stuff with investors yesterday, and we had at least another confirmation that GTA 6, as you can see here, is still targeting fall of calendar 2025, which means we'd be roughly 1 year away from the release of Grand Theft Auto 6. That's pretty exciting. We do have Borderlands 4, Mafia, the Old Country, all of that on there, and WWE 2K25, which I assume we'll hear about in January, as they're looking to push that out the door before the end of this current fiscal year. But, I mean, overall, Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be a massive release for them, and they want to make sure they get it right. So that's clearly one of the reasons people believe that it could get delayed if it's not necessarily up to their expectations. With the amount of money it's going to make, not only on release, but then on the long run, they will delay it to make sure it comes out polished and just a massive experience. Keep in mind, Grand Theft Auto 5, now over 205 million copies that have sold, so they technically do have to wait a few more months to make sure it's right. It's probably worth it. Also, we did get the nominations for the Golden Joystick Ultimate Game of the Year, which we can see that here, and the list are 12 games, so it does make it a bit easier for nominations if you have 12 slots. If you have 6, it's significantly more difficult. I mean, you can see Satisfactory, Astrobot, Silent Hill 2 Remake, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, Dragon Age The Veilguard, Metaphor ReFantazio, Animal Well, Balatro, Tekken 8, Helldivers 2, Black Myth Wukong. Again, if you can just list 12 top games, it's a bit easier. When you have to start knocking them down to 6, that's where things get a bit more controversial and contentious, but there you go. 12 different games, and it is kind of difficult to pick which one I'd go with right now. I think it's still Rebirth, but I understand when you look around at Astrobot and you look at Metaphor, I mean, those games rated higher and people really, really like them. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see here when the votes come in, which one wins. Oh, and here's something odd. It appears SEGA is actually delisting several games off different platforms, which includes Steam, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation. They listed this over on their website, and it says, what's happening to SEGA Classics games? Select games and bundles will be delisted from virtual stores, becoming unavailable for new purchases. Your own games will still be available in your library, so it's that situation of if you've purchased them, you can re-download them. But like the list on Steam, for example, they have many of them separated out. You can also buy them as just bundles. I mean, a ton of their games are here, which, I mean, Golden Axe titles, Jet Set Radio. We do have on the Xbox, they had like a Dreamcast collection that had Crazy Taxi on there, Alien Force, Shadow Dancer, Shining Force 1 and 2, Sonic Spinball. I mean, it's basically everything. So I'm not really sure what's going on here with SEGA. Some were thinking, oh, maybe licensing issues. SEGA owns these games. Like, I don't really know what the licensing issue would be necessarily, especially for all of these games all at once. It makes you wonder if they have something planned here to remove these things from the digital storefront, so maybe a re-release of some kind. I'm not sure what the plan is here, but I guess we'll have to pay attention as these are being delisted 1 month from now, December 6th. So if you wanted to pick these up, you might want to do that as soon as possible. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their Q&A with investors. I picked out 3 different questions, which there were actually only 5 total that were asked, which was interesting. Usually it's like 8 to 10 questions, so maybe they just had a handful that were asked and that was kind of it. But at this time, it's available in Japanese, and we did have these machine translated over and stuff. So I will double back just to see if there's any other little tidbits that that come out when they do release the official English version of these questions. But to be honest, many of them are pretty straightforward, and Nintendo had some interesting answers, especially when it came to R&D, but also their next generation device. Now, we can see this posted up. We have the first question, and again, these are all representatives from Nintendo, so obviously Furukawa, we have Shigeru Miyamoto there, and many others. This was the question saying, in today's presentation, it was mentioned that the successor to the Nintendo Switch will be able to play Nintendo Switch software and continue to support Nintendo Switch Online. Given this, won't the motivation for current Nintendo Switch owners to purchase the new hardware immediately upon release be diminished? How does Nintendo plan to convey the unique appeal of the successor console to these customers? Well, that's a good question by the investor. Again, sometimes you get some terrible questions. I gotta admit, these three we're gonna go over are pretty good. This was actually from Nintendo with Shintaro Furukawa answering, saying, given the wide adoption of the Nintendo Switch, we believe that making it possible for customers to play their existing Nintendo Switch software on the successor console is the optimal choice. This compatibility will allow customers to continue enjoying the games they've already purchased and select their next titles from the extensive library available for Nintendo Switch. We'll provide further information about the successor console, including its compatibility with the Nintendo Switch at a later date. As a company that offers integrated hardware and software entertainment, we are committed to showcasing its appeal through various approaches as we have done in the past. So, I mean, again, this isn't a bad question in the sense that, hey, if it mimics the Switch too much to the point where it's even playing the same games, what's the pull to get people onto the next system? Because in their mind, sure, Nintendo could say it plays games better, they look better, it's 4K, but is that enough to get people over? Unless you have unique experiences. And that's what Nintendo's saying, hey, we have different approaches to this. It's going to be different in some regards. We're just not ready to share that just yet. It's an interesting view because most of us were like, if Nintendo does not have this thing backwards compatible, that will be a problem. That'll be a PR disaster. They're kind of looking at it as, well, okay, hold on. Won't that make it too Switch-like? How do you let them know it's next-gen enough? Moving over here to the second question, they ask, rising development costs have become a significant issue in the gaming industry. How does Nintendo view this situation, and will the company's R&D spending continue to grow? Can anything be done on the hardware side to control these increasing development costs? This is actually from Shigeru Miyamoto, who says, Nintendo's research and development expenses have been rising yearly. Given that the scale of development has expanded, some cost increases are just unavoidable. However, we place more importance on the content we create rather than the size of the development budget. We aim to create products we believe will satisfy our customers, investing as much effort as necessary to ensure a polished final product. A key element is identifying themes worth refining, a principle that has remained unchanged since the days of the family computer, the Famicom. While personal preferences vary, it is certain that innovations, things never seen before, are always worth exploring. The more we refine such novel concepts, the more value they acquire. Our focus is on nurturing developers who value Nintendo's uniqueness, enabling them to dedicate sufficient resources to reach a satisfying level of completion for each game. In the entertainment industry, including toys, it is possible to create appealing products based on the creativity of ideas without high costs. Not every product needs to have high development expenses. In gaming too, it's possible to create fun experiences with a small team and a short development period given today's technology. Maintaining this perspective is crucial. So Nintendo in particular, they do have big projects, games that take half a decade or more to develop. Look at like the big 3D Zelda games. Even though Tears of the Kingdom was a sequel or a follow-up using many of the same assets and stuff from Breath of the Wild, it still took a while. Like, it wasn't out 3 years later or something from 2017. It took some time. So they still have these big projects, like we assume the next 3D Mario game that, it's still hard to believe that Mario Odyssey came out in 2017. Here we are at the end of 2024, 7 years later, and we don't have the next big 3D Mario game yet. But then you do have smaller projects that really focus in on a singular idea and build the game around it, even at a lower budget, like The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. You can look at that and go, okay, obviously that didn't cost as much as Tears of the Kingdom, but it has that unique idea of Zelda running around and just creating stuff to either help her in combat or get her around different obstacles. And that's kind of the idea, that uniqueness, as they are mentioning here when it comes to their game development budgets, not ballooning out of control or taking 7 or 8 years to make every single game. And then the final question here, they ask, when developing new hardware, it's essential to focus on Nintendo's unique style of innovation. However, if the hardware is overly unique, it might make software development challenging for third-party developers. How does Nintendo balance innovation with ease of development for external software creators? They say the unique functions and features in our hardware are not created by the hardware development team alone. Rather, they developed collaboratively with the software team to determine how we can deliver a unique entertainment experience. Naturally, we also consider the needs of third-party developers during this process. In development, we create various prototypes, test how they feel, and refine the ones that show the most promise. Recently, the importance of system software that runs the hardware and software has also increased. Therefore, system software developers now play a crucial role in this integrated development process. Balancing uniqueness with ease of development is something we have valued over the years. Moving forward, we aim to continue producing products that reflect Nintendo's unique approach while also considering ease of development for software creators. And this to me was the answer that stood out the most right now. They also shared a slide, which we might go over in a separate video, of different third parties they're working to deepen their relationships with, as they said. And they're mentioning your system software, which is basically the operating system for the most part of the device that they're creating here, the Switch 2, and the idea of making it so it is easier to develop for, which that is something that seemed to open up the current Switch right now with many indie developers and tons of third parties that you wouldn't expect to show up on a Nintendo platform, or at least ones that hadn't been there in a while or it seemed like they kind of abandoned them a bit and then came back. In this case, them continue that trend while also trying to figure out that unique approach for their next system, as they mentioned, is crucial. But I mean, they broke it down to, okay, there's software, there's hardware, but system software is like the most important thing, the crucial part of this to make sure we get it right. So third parties are happy with what we're putting out, but also we can put that Nintendo spin on it for first party stuff. And that might be the most interesting part about their next system, at least for me, is how that OS, that operating system, that user experience ends up looking after what they learned from the Switch. The Switch is fast, the next system is going to be faster, I believe, like getting into games, all this stuff, I think will just be quicker, even more so than we have now. But it feels like they would need it to be a bit more robust in general because the current system does feel a bit too simplistic at times. If they can make it so they don't sacrifice the speed, but also can do a lot more on the OS level, I think that will probably be the quote-unquote final form for Nintendo when it comes to their system software. So that is something we'll have to keep an eye on here as we go towards their eventual reveal, and maybe that being something that they really focus in on with their initial showing of the system. Next up, let's talk about SEGA and their current push to revive a lot of their older intellectual properties. The big one, I think, for many people is like Jet Set Radio or Crazy Taxi, which I did a poll. We'll check in on that here pretty soon to which one people are most excited about. But VGC did have an interview with a SEGA representative around their plans here, why they're doing this, why they're making all these games come back. And even another one that they seem to have just confirmed will also be getting a new entry. We can see this posted up. This is over on VGC. This is from Justin Scarpone, who's the new global head of transmedia, whose job is to now take the success of the Sonic brand outside of video games and replicate it with Sega's other franchises. They say, quote, "The strategy is to turn us into an entertainment company with games as our core pillar business, just as Disney would say films are. We want to be in the position where it's okay if there are people who love some of our IP who have never played a game, but have seen all of our films, been to our live shows, been to our attractions, or bought our merchandise. So we have a suite of titles in development right now that fall into that legacy bucket, which we announced last year at the Game Awards: Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, Streets of Rage, Shinobi, and we have another Virtua Fighter being developed. So all that's very exciting. And then in certain instances, we're also doing animation series or live action films to augment that and be part of those roadmaps." So there you have it. It sounds like a new Virtua Fighter is in development, which we had sort of heard about before. I think there were like rumors or some reports about this happening for a new Virtua Fighter, but yeah, it looks like they're working on one. We'll just have to see how that turns out exactly. But then also the idea of them doing this entertainment push, as in, rather than just be a video game company, they're an entertainment company. It's also what it seems like Nintendo is doing right now. Yes, games are at the core of their business, but we see Nintendo continue to branch out more and more and more, whether it is with merchandise, theme parks, movies. Sega kind of doing the same thing here. And we're just seeing many of these companies do that now. Like, obviously we see Sony doing it quite a bit currently and others. So it just seems like ways for them to break out of the quote unquote mold of just being in gaming and trying to reach more people, maybe with other forms of media first, and then bring them back to games. So SEGA seems all in on this. Get a lot of their older IPs that maybe the new audience, younger audience, isn't as familiar with. Introduce it again, yes, as a game, but also maybe as an animated series, maybe as a movie, and sort of do what they've been doing with Sonic, which, I mean, the Sonic movies are just churning out tons and tons of money for SEGA, but also a lot of awareness for the Sonic franchise. So maybe they can strike gold with a Shinobi or a Jet Set Radio or a Crazy Taxi. Maybe Virtua Fighter can make a big comeback, and that is actually very exciting for SEGA as a company, but also as fans, right? Just gaming history and the lineage there for SEGA, seeing them try to bring these back. And I'm really hoping at least a few of them work out. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about those PlayStation 5 Pro reviews that went live yesterday, and it went about how I expected. I mean, what we've been discussing with the PlayStation 5 Pro this entire time is, yes, it's a more expensive device that is going to make the picture look a bit better, a bit clearer, but the vast majority of people who are either buying a PS5, have one now, are probably fine with the base PS5. And in fact, that was kind of reinforced here by multiple outlets. Like IGN even gave it a number score. I know they give consoles number scores all the time. It just, for some reason, it seems weird to me. The consoles get scores. I mean, I get games, but I don't know, something about just hardware itself. Like, so okay, the PS5 Pro, it got a 7, which is, yeah, I mean, that's IGN, that makes sense. They say the PlayStation 5 Pro is an impressive console with noticeable boosts in performance and graphics for games to take advantage of its powerful hardware, but for $700, you'll need to think twice about whether or not the upgrade is worth the price tag. And actually go a bit further, something they did point out that was good was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, saying with the Pro Enhancement patch, has a new versatility mode that merges both the high-quality graphics setting with 60 FPS performance into a singular mode, so there's no choice paralysis, and it delivers the exact type of experience that they wanted, which that was kind of the push, or at least the sell by Mark Cerny, is you won't have to choose fidelity or performance. In this case, it's just Final Fantasy VII Rebirth versatility mode, you're good to go. However, it seems that many other games with these Pro Enhancement patches introduced more options, so we're kind of getting like extra choice paralysis in some cases. I will say Digital Foundry did a good like hour-long video on this, just going over some of the things they were able to test and some of the footage they captured. The part that's still very intriguing to me is the PS4 boost mode, quote unquote, the upscaling stuff that they're doing where they're cleaning up the image somewhat, because in some cases they showed it did look noticeably sharper, but it also seems like it struggles with film grain or chromatic aberration and other weird video effects that we had back then, even mentioning that the Order 1886 just doesn't seem to be affected much by the PS5 Pro scaling technique, which is unfortunate because that is a game that I thought would have done pretty well with it. I still think Killzone as a launch title for the PS4 might be interesting to check out, that or maybe Infamous. So yeah, I'm going to be checking out the PS5 Pro hopefully later on today, as long as UPS is able to get it out here early enough, and I'll do a video. We'll unbox it, check it out next to a PS5, an original one, and a Slim and stuff, and just kind of go over some initial thoughts on it. And then yes, the teardown will follow up this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, which of these announced game revivals from SEGA are you most interested in? Well, Jet Set Radio is number 1. I kind of figured it would be, but okay, Crazy Taxi at number 2, and then Shinobi, then Virtua Fighter. Yeah, Virtua Fighter is interesting. I feel like when I think of fighting games, I usually think of like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Virtua Fighter, I remember being more popular back on like the old days, like the 90s and stuff. When we got into like the Xbox 360 and the PS3 era, it kind of feels like it was left behind a bit, although I know there was like a Virtua Fighter game there. It felt like it didn't keep up with the Mortal Kombats and the Street Fighters and stuff. But I know that there is a diehard Virtua Fighter fan base out there. I know Sean is one of them and made a huge thing about that being really kind of announced yesterday in that interview. So I'll be very curious to see how they're able to tackle that. But for me, I mean, come on, Jet Set Radio with the newer technology having these systems, that could look awesome. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Alex, who says, Nintendo, we don't have Switch 2 news. Stock drops by 5%. Nintendo, Switch 1 games will work on Switch 2. Stock increased by 10%. Yeah, investors can be quite volatile with some of the stuff around the financial reporting that happens with these companies. In this case, though, it seemed like Nintendo was like, we'll talk about this next year, January or something, and then that was enough for investors to be like, they're gonna miss the holiday, fine, we'll move our money around. But then the idea of, this is compatible with Switch 1 games, it's not going to be something out of left field for Nintendo. They're gonna more or less stick to the Switch formula. Okay, great, I'm back in. That's kind of all it really takes here. And look, it was obvious to many of us that Nintendo was going to stick with the hybrid route, but investors aren't necessarily always following the news as close as we are for something like gaming like this. And also, to be fair, most of us aren't necessarily going to be risking millions of dollars over that unless we're absolutely sure that that's the case they were going with, and it looks like it is. So yeah, stock drops, then just shoots right back up. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card for you. Or maybe you wanted to hear a bit more about Nintendo's investors meeting and even a little bit of Pokemon TCG Pocket, I'll leave a link to the latest Game & Talk that aired last night right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.